The first question is, if I understand correctly, according to Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, samadhi is seen as the ultimate spiritual goal, but Bhagavan's teaching focuses on Atma-vichara or Swarupa Dhyana alone. Is that correct?
Yes. The term samadhi is a term that is native to yoga philosophy, not to Advaita philosophy. Because there were so many different systems of philosophy in India, and they were all interacting with each other. And there were also so many different, along with each system of philosophy, there were different practices, because in India, philosophy is not only concerned with reasoning, it's concerned with the ultimate goal of philosophy is moksha. Now we are in bondage. Our ultimate aim is moksha. So all systems of Indian philosophy have moksha as their ultimate aim. So the philosophy is a means, it's not the end. So all philosophies are accompanied by different types of practices. So there were, in the yoga system, yes, the ultimate aim is samadhi. The term samadhi is used in a lot of Advaita texts, but it's a term borrowed from yoga. And the reason it's used in Advaita texts, the aim of the Advaitins is to say, whatever you can achieve by yoga, you can also achieve by the path of Advaita. In fact, you can achieve it much better, because the yoga, the samadhi, that is the aim of the yogis, is still a limited aim. Bhagavan made it very clear that is the yogic samadhi, the nirvikalpa samadhi, the ordinary nirvikalpa samadhi, so-called kevala nirvikalpa samadhi, is only a state of manolaya. Our aim is not manolaya, our aim is manonasa. The state of manonasa is what Bhagavan called sahaja samadhi. Generally, he called it sahaja sthiti, our natural state. But if at all you want to attain a samadhi, the only worthy samadhi to attain is your natural state. So Bhagavan sometimes referred to our natural state as sahaja samadhi. The term samadhi it is explained in many different ways. One of the explanations of the state of samadhi is it means samadhi. D means the mind or intellect. Sama means the state of equilibrium. So that state in which we remain balanced, not slipping into sleep and not slipping into thoughts, that state balance between the two, that is samadhi. That is one explanation. But anyway, according to Bhagavan, that state of perfect equilibrium in which we remain balanced in the center, that is our natural state. That is sahaja samadhi. Sahaja samadhi, as I say, is just another name for our natural state. What is our natural state? A state of pure awareness, where we're aware of nothing other than ourselves. The yogic samadhi, the kevala nirvikalpa samadhi, or I've forgotten what in yoga, they don't actually use the term nirvikalpa, they use some other equivalent term. I've forgotten what it is now. But anyway, according to Bhagavan, that yogic samadhi is only a state of manolaya. And that is, from a spiritual point of view, that is attaining manolaya is futile. To illustrate this, Bhagavan used to tell the story of a yogi who was practicing yoga on the banks of the Ganga. He was following Patanjali's yoga, so he was, or the eightfold, the Ashtanga yoga of Patanjali, the eight-limbed yoga, and the eight-limbed yoga takes you through a series of practices, the ultimate aim of which is samadhi. And one of the principal practices among the eightfold limbs is pranayama. Pranayama is a key practice in yoga. So by pranayama and associated practices, this yogi was able to go into nirvikalpa samadhi for prolonged periods of time. So sometimes for many days, he would be sitting there absorbed in samadhi. And so the local villagers, they thought, this is a great sage here. So they were providing for all his material needs. And one person came and wanted to learn from him how to attain this lofty state of samadhi. So he became his disciple. One day, after he had been for a long time in samadhi, the yogi woke up and he was feeling thirsty. So he asked his disciple to fetch water. So the disciple went to the Ganga, which was nearby, and with a vessel and a cup of some sort, and collected some water and brought it back. But by the time he came back, the yogi had gone into samadhi again. And this time he was so deeply absorbed in samadhi, he remained in that state for 300 years. This is how Bhagavan told the story. Nowadays, some people may say, how is it possible if the body cannot live for 300 years? But according to the yogis, if you remain in a state of, if you remain deeply absorbed in samadhi, all the physiological functions, the breath, the heartbeat and all other things, they slow down. So there may be just one heartbeat every half minute or whatever. I don't know. I've not taken any interest in these things. But anyway, he was able to remain in this state of samadhi for 300 years. In the course of those 300 years, the river Ganga had changed its course. So it was no longer near his hut. It was some miles away. The village that was nearby, because the river had moved, the village also moved. So a dense jungle had grown up around where this yogi was sitting absorbed in samadhi, and nobody was aware of his presence there. All those who knew that he was there had died and moved away, and he was completely forgotten about. When he woke up from his samadhi after 300 years, the first thing he did was he angrily asked, "Where's my water?" What Bhagavan said, what did this illustrate? The last thought that was in his mind before he went into samadhi was the first thought that rose when he came out of samadhi. That means not even the most superficial thought in his mind was eradicated. So what to say about all the vasanas? So why Bhagavan told this story is to illustrate in the state of Manolaya, we cannot eradicate vasanas. Vasanas are our inclination to attend to things other than ourselves. Vasanas come into play only when we rise as ego, because whose vasanas are they? Who is inclined to attend to other things? Only ego. In the state of Manolaya, ego is merged back in its source. So since the vasanas are not since there's no ego, vasanas are not operating in that state. Since the vasanas are not operating, we cannot overcome the vasanas. It's only in the waking and dream state when our vasanas are operating, when we're feeling the inclination to think about this or to attend to that. That is when we can weaken the Vishaya vasanas, because the nature of vasanas is such that the more we allow ourselves to be swayed by a vasana, the more that vasana is strengthened. The more we refrain from being swayed, the more we don't allow ourselves to be swayed by a vasana, the more that vasana is weakened. We can all see this in our life. If there's something that interests us, the more we think about it, the more our interest in that thing grows. If something that interested us in the past, we may after some time have thought, this is no longer interesting. We may have taken interest in other things. So the thing that we were formerly interested in, because we no longer think about that interest wanes and the new interest grows. So, but the nature of vasanas, they are strengthened to the extent to which we allow ourselves to be swayed by them. We can see this, for example, with obsessive thoughts. Some people have a obsession to keep everything perfectly clean, or they may have all sorts of phobias and obsessions people have. The more they dwell on those things, the stronger they become. So it becomes a central part of their life, keeping everything spick and span. If anything's out of order or out of place, then my life is disturbed. So it has to be all spick and span. That becomes, their whole life is centered around, can become centered around there. This is the way the mind works. The more we allow ourselves to be swayed by any vasana, the stronger that vasana becomes. The more we refrain from being swayed by a vasana, the weaker it becomes. So by the practice of self-investigation, we are trying to hold on to self-attentiveness. To the extent to which we hold on to self-attentiveness, we are thereby not allowing ourselves to be swayed by Vishaya vasanas, which is our inclination to attend to anything else. So by the practice of self-investigation, of Atma-vichara, or self-attentiveness, we are weakening our Vishaya vasanas, and we are strengthening the Sat vasana. Sat vasana means the inclination just to be as we actually are, the inclination to attend to nothing other than our own being. So this is how we can weaken the Vishaya vasana, strengthen the Sat vasana. Only when the Vishaya vasanas are weakened to a considerable extent will we be able to turn our attention a full 180 degrees within, and thereby merge back into our source and forever. So by remaining in nirvikalpa samadhi, we don't make any spiritual progress. Just like in sleep, it's very pleasant to be in sleep, but do we make any spiritual progress in sleep? No, we don't, because we're just in a state of manolaya. Likewise, nirvikalpa samadhi may be a very pleasant state, but you can't make any spiritual progress in nirvikalpa samadhi. As Bhagavan says in the 8th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, when he says it very clearly. He says, what he says he says in the first few sentences, for the mind to cease, except vicharana, that self-investigation, there are no other adequate means. If made to cease by other means, the mind remaining for a while as if it had ceased will again rise up. Even by pranayama, the mind will cease. However, so long as the prana remains subsided, the mind will also remain subsided. And when the prana emerges, the mind will also emerge and wander under the sway of its vasanas. He gives us a warning there. Merely remaining in a state, by pranayama, it's possible to bring about a state of nirvikalpa samadhi, which is a state of manolaya. So long as you're in that state of manolaya, the mind remains still. It's not swayed by its vasana because it's merged back in its source. So how can it be swayed when it's not there to be swayed? But as soon as when the breath starts, when the breath emerges, that's when the breath becomes active again, the mind will also become active. And what will happen to the mind? It will wander under the sway of its vasanas. What Bhagavan is indicating here is by merely remaining in a state of manolaya, the vasanas are not weakened. So what is required in verse 13 of Upadesha Undiyar, Bhagavan says, dissolution of mind is of two kinds, laya and nasa. What is dissolved in laya will rise again. If its form dies in nasa, it will not rise. So Bhagavan is here distinguishing between what is the difference between laya and nasa. Laya is a temporary state of dissolution. So whatever is in laya includes states like sleep, coma, swoon, general anesthesia, nirvikalpa samadhi. All these are all states of manolaya. Essentially, there's no difference between them. The difference between them is the means by which we go into that state. We go into sleep because we're tired. We go into swoon because something shocking has happened. We go into coma maybe because of some injury. We go into general anesthesia because of the anesthetic drugs that have been applied. We go into nirvikalpa samadhi because of yogic practices, pranayama and other yogic practices. But all these states of laya, they're all temporary. Whatever is in laya will surely rise again. It will not rise again only if it is destroyed. So nasa is what we are aiming for is not manolaya, but manonasa. Then in the next verse, verse 14, he says, Odika valiye odungum ulate. The mind which subsides when one restrains the breath. So if we restrain the breath, the mind will subside. If we send that mind which has subsided, the implication here, if we allow the mind to subside completely, it remains in manolaya, then we can't do anything. So the implication is, by pranayama, if you allow the mind to subside to a certain extent, in other words, if you let the mind calm down, how can you, instead of going to manolaya, what should you do? You should then send it on what Bhagavan calls here or vari. The word or vari has two meanings. Or is a verb that means to investigate or know. So or vari can mean oram vari, the investigating part, the part of investigation. In other words, it's implying the part of self-investigation. Or is also an alternative form of the word oru. Oru means one. But before a vowel, oru becomes or, just like the English indefinite article, a, if you, before a vowel, it becomes an. So in the same way, oru becomes or. So or can mean one. So if one sends it on one path, what is the one path Bhagavan is talking about here? It's only the path of self-investigation, because according to Bhagavan, that is the one and only path by which we can bring about the destruction of mind, as he clearly explains in that 8th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār. So what he says here, the mind which has subsided, which will become calm when one restrains the breath, only when one sends that mind on the path of investigation, there's one path of self-investigation, will its form perish. In other words, we can attain manonasa only by self-investigation. So this is a warning here, yogis. Don't allow yourself to go into nirvikalpa samadhi, because if you go into nirvikalpa samadhi, that's a state of manolaya. Sooner or later, the mind will rise again and wander under the sway of its vasanas. So before allowing it to subside in manolaya, when you achieve a certain degree of calmness, then you should use that calm state of mind to turn the attention back within to investigate who am I. That is the implication here. So the aim of yoga is quite different. That is, their aim is nirvikalpa samadhi. According to Bhagavan, that is not a worthy aim, because if you subside in nirvikalpa samadhi, you'll sooner or later come out of it. If you want to aim for samadhi, then the only true samadhi is your own natural state, the state of pure awareness. We can achieve that state of pure awareness only by investigating ourselves. When we investigate ourselves, ego subsides and merges back in its source. What is its source? That state of pure awareness. So sahaja samadhi is our real nature. And Bhagavan even talks, though generally when Bhagavan's talking about sahaja samadhi, he's talking about our natural state, which is the goal that we're all aiming for. He also sometimes talked about the practice of sahaja samadhi. In the introduction to his Tamil translation of Drisya Viveka, which is one of the minor works attributed to Shankara, he wrote an introduction, and in that, because there's a lot in Drisya Viveka about different types of samadhi. So Bhagavan just indicates here what is the real samadhi that we should aim for. It is only sahaja samadhi, And so he talks about the practice of sahaja samadhi, and he describes it very clearly. What he says is, Purva samskara tinal atotra til ulla drishtiye niti, removing that view of other things which appear due to purva samskaras. Then this is the important bit. Taneye bahyanta drishti vedam indri epodum nadam sahaja samadhi parakatal. That means by the practice of sahaja samadhi, which is always investigating oneself without the bahyanta drishti beda. That means without the distinction of seeing inside and outside. That is, so long as our attention is outside, so long as we're looking outside means towards anything other than ourselves. Even attending to our thoughts or whatever is looking outside, because the thoughts are something extraneous to ourselves. So long as we're looking outside, in other words, so long as we're looking at anything other than ourselves, we need to be told to look within. But if we actually look within, the difference between inside and outside is dissolved, because what exists is only oneself. So we need to attend to ourselves so keenly, but even that distinction between inside and outside is dissolved. And that state of being so firmly fixed in self-attentiveness, that is what Bhagavan calls the practice of sahaja samadhi. So the only samadhi that Bhagavan recommended that we aim for or practice is sahaja samadhi. And how to practice sahaja samadhi? Just by attending only to ourselves, by investigating nothing other than ourselves, investigating ourselves so keenly, but this distinction between inside and outside, the distinction between oneself and other, that dissolves. Because why does it dissolve? Because when we're attending only to ourselves, there is no outside to attend to. Other things appear only when we allow our attention to go outwards. If we turn our attention withinwards, then there is no outside. So the answer to the question is yes, Bhagavan's path is quite different to the path of yoga. In yoga, they say, in I think the first or second sutra of the Yoga Sutra, it says, yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is restraining the chitta vritti, the activity of the mind. Bhagavan commented on that. It's recorded in talks and Mahayoga and other places. Bhagavan commented on that. This is not practical. But trying to restrain it's not a worthy goal, merely trying to restrain the chitta vrittis. Why? Because every day when we fall asleep, the chitta vrittis are controlled, but we don't get any benefit we don't get any spiritual benefit. However long we're asleep, we don't get any spiritual benefit thereby. So trying to control the chitta vrittis is, firstly, it's not a worthy aim. It's missing the point. And secondly, if you try to restrain the breath, the thoughts, your attention is on the thoughts. So you're tending to a non-self. Our aim is to know what we actually are. As Bhagavan said, let thoughts appear or not appear. In the 6th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, he says, however many thoughts arise, so what? So Bhagavan is not concerned about thoughts. If a thought appears, that should remind us, oh, to whom did this thought appear? It appears only to me. So who am I? We turn our attention back towards ourselves. So the appearance of thoughts should just remind us of our own presence. Thoughts appear because we've allowed our attention to slip away from ourselves. Let us bring it back to ourselves. So Bhagavan said the only practical way is Atma-vichara. That means self-investigation, investigating what we ourselves actually are. So Bhagavan never That is for people who are inclined towards such other practices. He said, okay, if you want to practice yoga, practice it. But before you go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi, turn your mind back within, direct it on the Orvari, the path of investigation. Then only will its form die. So I hope that adequately answers that question. Probably more than adequately, but...
The next question is, I really struggle a lot with my mental health. I was severely abused as a child. And when I feel under threat, the feeling is intense. I keep going back to who am I, but I find it really uncomfortable.
Yes, the mind is an uncomfortable companion to live with. That is, so long as the mind is a source of endless trouble. In sleep, we are perfectly peaceful because there's no mind. Mind appears in waking and dream, and all troubles come along with it. We all undergo different prarabdha. So certain experiences that we've had in this lifetime may have a very strong impact on us. And it can, as you say, it can affect the mental health. People can feel, but whether we have a so-called healthy mind or an unhealthy mind, we all are up against the same basic problem. The basic problem is that is, what is the mind? The mind is, as Bhagavan says in verse 18 of Upadeshundya, Ennangale manam, thoughts alone are the mind. When Bhagavan talks about thoughts, he uses the term in a very broad sense. All mental phenomena, according to Bhagavan, are thoughts. So all what we normally call thoughts, feelings, perceptions, memories, workings of the intellect, the likes, the dislikes, the desires, attachments, all these are thoughts, according to Bhagavan. So the totality of all these mental phenomena or thoughts are what make up the mind. But of all thoughts, the root thought is only the first thought, I. The first thought, I, means ego. Why is it the root thought? Because all other thoughts are objects. Objects appear only in the view of the subject. The subject is this first thought, I. So without this first thought, no other thoughts could appear. So what the mind essentially is only this first thought, I. Because the nature of this thought, I, ego, is, as Bhagavan says, ego is a formless phantom. So it has no form of its own, and it's got no substance of its own. So it doesn't actually exist, but it seems to exist. So what is the nature of this ego? Bhagavan explains in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, Urupatri undam, grasping form, it comes into existence. Urupatri nekam, grasping form, it stands. Urupatri undu mikaongum, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Uruvittu urupatram, leaving form, it grasps form. So here Bhagavan indicates the very nature of the mind is to grasp form. Since ego is formless, form means anything other than itself. So all phenomena, all vishayas are what Bhagavan refers to here as form. And grasping those forms, how do we grasp them? By attending to them and experiencing them. So by attending to and experiencing things other than ourselves, this is the food on which the ego thrives. But if instead of attending to other things, if ego tries to attend to itself, in other words, if instead of trying to hold on to other things, it tries to hold on to itself, what happens to it? Bhagavan says in the next sentence, Tedinal otam pidikam. If sought, that means if it investigates itself, otam pidikam, it will take flight. It will run away. Why will it run away? Because we seem to be ego only so long as we're looking at other things. If we look at ourselves, has anyone ever seen any ego? Has anyone ever found any ego? We seem to be ego only when we're looking at other things. When we look at ourselves, there's no such thing as ego to be found. So ego takes flight. That means it subsides and dissolves back into its source. So whether our mind is healthy or unhealthy, we're all up against the same problem, which is our inclination to grasp form. Those forms which we are inclined to grasp are what are otherwise called vishayas. Vishayas means phenomena or objects. The inclination to attend to those vishayas are what are called vishaya vasanas. So the vishaya vasanas, because the nature of the ego cannot rise, stand, or flourish without grasping form, without attending to things other than itself. It has very strong inclination to be attending to things other than itself. So it is the nature of ego to have vishaya vasanas. So we are all up against vishaya vasanas. That is, whether our vishaya vasanas manifest as a seemingly healthy mind or a seemingly unhealthy mind, it's not really any significant difference. We're all up against this problem of vishaya vasanas. So how do we overcome vishaya vasanas? As I was saying earlier, the nature of vasanas as such, the more we allow ourselves to be swayed by any vishaya, by any vasana, the stronger it becomes. The more we refrain from being swayed by it, the weaker it becomes. So if we have some obsessive thoughts or some particular phobias, the only way to overcome them is not to dwell on that, to try and hold on more and more to self-attentiveness. This is the way of dealing with all vishaya vasanas, whatever may be their nature. All vishaya vasanas ultimately are the same. They're an inclination to attend to something other than ourselves. So if we've had a traumatic experience in childhood, if we were abused as a child, those thoughts of that abuse and the scars it has left on our mind will have a tendency to occupy our mind a lot. So we have to wean our mind off its concern for these things. The more we practice self-attentiveness, the more we are not allowing ourselves to be swayed by any type of vishaya vasana. So the weaker the vishaya vasanas become. So the way that is, this is not something that we can prescribe for all people who suffer from mental health, because this path is only for people who are attracted to it. If you tell a person who is not interested in this, or attend to yourself, then you'll overcome your mental health issues, it's not going to work, because they won't even have a liking to attend to themselves. In order to attend to ourselves, we need great love to do so. And we can get that love only by trying to attend to ourselves. That is, we may not have such great love to attend to ourselves now, but the fact that we are here talking about this subject means we've already been drawn to this path. So we at least have some liking to follow Bhagavan's path of self-investigation. So let us start following this path. Our progress may seem to be very slow, but Bhagavan said, perseverance is itself progress. There's no progress without perseverance. And the very fact that you're persevering is the sign that you're progressing. So however much you're troubled by mental health issues, if you're attracted to this path of self-investigation, you're indeed blessed. You're indeed very fortunate. Try your best to follow this. There are times when we all fail. Even those of us who don't have any specific mental health issues, we all succumb, we all are swayed by our vasanas time and time and time again. So how can we overcome these vasanas? Only by persevering in this practice of self-investigation. As Bhagavan says in the 10th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, without giving room even to the doubting thought, overcoming so many vasanas or dissolving so many vasanas, is it possible to remain only as Swarupa, as my own real nature? Without giving room to such thought, it is necessary to cling tenaciously to self-attentiveness. However great a sinner one may be, if instead of lamenting and weeping, I am a sinner. How am I going to be saved? If one completely rejects the thought that one is a sinner and is steadfast in self-attentiveness, one will certainly be saved, or one will certainly be reformed or transformed. So what he says here about a sinner equally applies to our mental health issues. However much we may be troubled by mental health issues, if instead of lamenting and weeping, oh, I'm troubled by mental health issues, how can I ever overcome them? If instead of lamenting like that, if we completely reject the thought that we have mental health issues and are zealous steadfast in self-investigation, self-attentiveness, we will certainly be transformed. So I'm not denying that you do have mental health issues. Many people have mental health issues, but whether we have mental health issues or not, we all have the fundamental mental health issue, but we've got strong Vasanas. So let us not lament about this. If we give up the thought that whether do I have mental health or not, lacking in mental health, doesn't matter. The health is, or lack of health is for the mind. We are not the mind. Who am I? We are, what we actually are is the ground, the support, the underlying foundation for the mind. That is as Bhagavan said, the mind is essentially just ego. Ego is just for false awareness. I am this body. But what is the underlying foundation, the adhara or the adhisthana, the ground on which this ego is resting, is only the fundamental awareness I am. That is, within ego itself, there is an element of reality. Ego is chit, jada, granti. It is a knot formed by the entanglement of chit and jada. Chit means awareness. That is the fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. Jada means what is not sentient, objects. Now we take ourselves to be this body, which is jada. Body means all the five sheaths, the body, life, mind, intellect, and will. All this entire bundle, these are all jada. They're all something other than ourselves. They are objects perceived by us. So we are not this body. So what we need to hold on to is what alone is real, which is that fundamental awareness I am. If we hold on to that fundamental awareness I am, then everything else will drop off. So let us not think that we are a sinner. Let us not think that we have mental health issues or not. We may have mental health issues. We may have done terrible sins. Bhagavan isn't denying that. But what he's saying is, let us not lament the fact. Let us not dwell on the fact. Give up that thought. Find out who you really are. If you know who you really are, you will know that you are ever pure. You have never done any sin. You've never had any mental health issue. So our aim is to know what we actually are. So mental health issues may trouble us, but let us try to leave those mental health issues to one side. Who am I who am I to whom all these mental health issues appear? Who am I who am troubled by these mental health issues? That is what we need to investigate. So it may seem to be difficult, but if we persevere, as Bhagavan says, if we are steadfast in self-attentiveness, if we persevere in trying, we will certainly be saved. We will certainly be transformed from this pitiful jiva suffering from mental health issues into what we actually are, which is will be transformed into what we actually are, which is that one infinite pure awareness I am. So I hope that adequately answered that question.
I think it should. There's another part to it a bit later on, as I missed it, which is, it's not really a part, it's just, I think this is sort of covered by what you said. It's that I believe Ramana is looking after me because he has manifested in several ways. I feel like I am fighting a really difficult battle. It feels really stressful, very stressful. Is there any advice? Thank you. I think that kind of has already been covered, really. It's just an extension.
Arjuna was fighting a really stressful battle. but he had Krishna as his charioteer. That is a very, very nice analogy for our state. We are fighting a difficult battle. We're fighting against our own. These vasanas are not something other than ourselves. They're our own inclinations. So we're fighting a battle with ourselves, a battle within our own will. But our charioteer, Bhagavan is our charioteer. So when he is on our side, we will certainly be saved. Yes, you're absolutely right. Bhagavan is taking care of you. Bhagavan is taking care of each and every one of us. So, but in all, he is doing all that is necessary to help us. We need to yield ourselves to him. So the more we depend on him, the more we rely on him, the more we yield ourselves to him. Yes, because of the strength of our Vishaya Vasanas, holding on to self-attentiveness seems to be very difficult, even though Bhagavan has told us it's actually easiest of all things. There's nothing easier than knowing ourselves, but it seems to us to be difficult because of our strong inclination to attend to other things. So we are fighting what seems to us to be a really difficult battle. But he is on our side. He is our charioteer. He is guiding us along this path. So let us trust in him and let us try our best to follow this simple path of self-attentiveness that he has shown us. Whether we follow this path or not, he is always taking care of us. But the more we surrender to ourselves to him, the more we will be availing ourselves of the help that he is always giving us. So yes, having firm faith, having firm trust in Bhagavan is a very, very great aid in this path. We are not alone. He is by our side. But since he is nothing other than ourselves, we are alone, but not in the ordinary sense of alone. He is always with us.
The next question is, aspirants differ in spiritual maturity, with some realizing the truth as soon as they hear, while others spend lifetimes doing mantra, puja, japa, that is using mind, body, and speech. As such, isn't a study of tatwas useful for some As such, isn't a study of tattvas useful for some for purification, while for others it need not be?
It depends on what your interests are. If you're interested in things other than yourself, if you're interested in knowing things other than yourself, then analyzing these tattvas may be very interesting, may even seem to be useful. But what are we interested in? What is our aim? That is, all systems of Indian philosophy, all systems of Indian spirituality, they all have moksha as their aim. But what they consider moksha to be differs from school to school. According to Bhagavan, moksha is nothing but annihilation of ego. And we can annihilate ego only by knowing what we actually are. If our aim is to know what we actually are, then investigating the tattvas is unnecessary. If your aim is not to know what you actually are, if your aim is to know something else, then analyzing these tattvas may be necessary. If you're employed by the barber to sweep up the rubbish at the end of the day and throw it away, sweep it up and throw it away and take your wages and go home. But if you're passionately interested in analyzing the hairs on the barber's shop floor, how many hairs there are, how long they are, what colors they are, classifying them into so many different groups and everything. If that's your interest, by all means do that. Bhagavan has no objection. If you want to, if you take this dream to be real and you're interested in experiencing this dream, yes, by all means. If you're interested in the tattvas, analyze them. But if your aim is to know what you actually are, it is unnecessary. That's why he says in this paragraph, he says, Tanne Arya Bendia Oruban, a person who wants to or needs to know oneself. So if we want to know ourselves, analyzing the tattvas is unnecessary. If we want to learn philosophy, then analyzing tattvas may be very interesting. What is our aim? Is our aim to know ourselves or to know all these so many different systems of philosophy? There are so many different systems of philosophy. You can spend many, many lifetimes studying philosophy, and you will not get to the end of philosophy. There's so many books have been written, so many thoughts have been thought about philosophy. What is the philosophy that is useful? The ultimate aim is we want to be happy. In order to be happy, since happiness is our real nature, we need to know what we actually are. In order to know what we actually are, we need to investigate ourselves. So ultimately, all the benefit we can get out of studying philosophy is to understand that there's only one thing worth knowing: who am I? If we've understood that, all the rest of philosophy becomes superfluous. So this analyzing of these tattvas, and then which tattvas to analyze? According to Sankhya, there are 24. According to Shaivism, there are 36. According to other schools, there are different. There are so many different. Everyone has their own view of what are the tattvas. According to Bhagavan, there is only one tattva, and that is Tane tattvam. Oneself alone is the reality, or oneself alone is oneself. That is the reality. I am I, that alone is real. So let us hold on to ourselves and hold on to the real tattva and forget all the other tattvas. But if you're interested in the other tattvas, Bhagavan isn't going to object. If people are interested, so many people who came to Bhagavan were not really interested in the annihilation of ego. So Bhagavan let them go their own course. And if they were interested, if they asked him about mantra japa or things, yes, very good, do mantra japa. If that's what you want to do, Bhagavan has no objection. This is advice. Nāṉ Ār were teachings that he gave to Shiva Prakasham Pillai. Shiva Prakasham Pillai came, and what was the first question he asked Bhagavan? Swami, Nāṉ Ār, who am I? That was why Shiva Prakasham Pillai came to Bhagavan. And if we are wise, that should be the reason why we have come to Bhagavan. So if our aim is to know ourselves, studying all these different classifications of tattvas and how many there are, and what are their gunas, and why in Sankhya it is said there are 24, whereas in other systems it says there are 36, and other systems it says so many different views are there. Which view is right? One thing that is certain, one thing that we all know without any doubt is I am. Philosophies, there are innumerable philosophies. Religions, there are innumerable religions. Practices, there are innumerable practices. Who is to know what is right? But one thing we all know is true is I am. According to Bhagavan, that alone is true. Nothing else is real. So let us investigate who am I, and that is the end of the matter. But if you want to study tattvas, by all means do so. But by studying this philosophy, we don't purify the mind, because what are the impurities in the mind? The impurities in the mind are the Vishaya Vasanas. Your inclination to study about all these Vishayas, the tattvas after all are Vishayas, they're objects, they're phenomena, things other than ourselves. Your inclination to study them is itself a Vishaya Vasana. So how are you purifying the mind? We don't purify the mind merely by studying philosophy. We purify the mind. The best way is to turn our attention within and investigate what we actually are. If we're not inclined to do so, then the next best way to purify the mind is by bhakti, by taking God to be something other than yourself. You do puja, you do japa, you do dhyana. That's all good. And Bhagavan has talked about that in the early verses of Upadeshundya, how all these different types of action, puja, japa, and dhyana, how they're efficacious in purifying the mind, each more efficacious than the previous one. But what is the best way of purifying the mind? That is what he reveals in verse 8 of Upadeshundya. Anya bhavatin abanahamah Abanahamahum Ananya Baba Mayundi Para and Naitimo Utumono Undi Para. That is, rather than taking God to be something other than ourselves and worshiping him accordingly, is the implication, understanding that he is nothing other than oneself. He is I, and therefore meditating, Ananya Baba, meditating on nothing other than oneself, that is best among all. So if you're really serious about purifying the mind, The best way is to practice self-attentiveness. If you still are not inclined to attend to yourself, then bhakti, that is the anya bhakti, taking God to be something other than yourself and worshipping him by puja, japa, and dhyana, is the next best way of purifying the mind. And for that, you don't need all these tatwas. All you need is love for God. That is the key. Whether we take to the path of Anya Bhakti, taking God to be other than ourselves, or the path of Ananya Bhakti taught by Bhagavan, the path of not taking God to be anything other than oneself, the key is love. As Bhagavan said, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. Love is the key to knowing what we actually are. Love is the key to purifying the mind. To purify the mind, you need love. You don't need but to know about whether they're 24 or 36 or 96 or you can enumerate any number of tattvas you like. What is the use of that? It's useless according to Bhagavan. It's just like counting the hairs in a barber shop and analyze those in their different qualities. It's all useless according to Bhagavan. But if you are interested, by all means do so.
Michael, the next question, there are sort of 4 questions, but they're basically 2 parts, two topics. And I'll start with the second part because that has to do with love. So that might go well with what you've been talking about. So the question is that I once heard you say that being awareness, happiness is also love. I don't understand how awareness and love are the same. Can you please explain? Is it by keeping on practicing self-attentiveness that we get the direct experiential understanding of that? Of love being awareness. And the second part of this is, I admire your great devotion to practice that Bhagavan taught us. How can we develop such all-consuming love to know and be what we actually are? Okay.
Again, we don't need philosophy to know that love is our real nature. We all, as Bhagavan says in the first paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, where he's pointing out things that are should be obvious to all of us, he says, we all, for everyone, the greatest love is only for oneself. So we all, having love for ourselves is our very nature. There is nobody who does not love themselves. And so what is the cause of love? He says, priyataku sukhamai karanamādalalam. The cause of love is only happiness. That is, we love those things that we think will make us happy, and we dislike those things that we think will make us unhappy. So love always follows happiness. And conversely, when we get the things we love, we are happy. When we get the things we don't love, the things we dislike, we're unhappy. So happiness and love are inseparable. That is why generally, that is often, we're all familiar with the fact that Brahman is described as Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat means being, what actually exists, our own existence. Chit is awareness, and Ananda is happiness. Sat is Chit. Why? Because nothing other than awareness actually exists. Awareness is what actually exists. So awareness alone is Sat. And the very nature of awareness is happiness. When all other things are removed, as in sleep, what do we experience in sleep? We experience happiness because happiness is our real nature. And we all have love for ourselves. The fact that we have love for ourselves is another evidence. And this is all Bhagavan points out in the very first sentence of the first paragraph of Nāṉ Ār. The fact that we all have love for ourselves, and the fact that happiness alone is the cause of love, is another indication that happiness is our real nature. And love is also our real nature, because love always follows happiness. Because we are happiness, we love ourselves. And we are happiness because our very nature is love. So happiness and love are inseparable. And what we actually are is awareness. And the very nature of awareness is happiness. And the very nature of awareness is love. That is why an alternative term that is often used, instead of Satchidananda, is Asti Bhati Priyam. Asti means being or existence. Bhati means shining. That's awareness. What shines is awareness. And Priyam means love, because love and happiness are inseparable. That is, we love whatever makes us happy. We dislike whatever makes us unhappy. And when we get what we love, we are happy. So happiness, we cannot separate happiness and love. So long as we're looking outwards, happiness and love seem to have a cause and effect relationship. Happiness is the cause of love, and love is the cause of happiness. They work. It's a two-way cause-effect relationship. That's so long as we look outside. When we look within, our very nature is love, and that love itself is happiness. So happiness and love actually are one and the same thing. So that's the first part, or rather the second part of the question. What was? Oh, the next part was about how to cultivate love for this. All I can say, whatever little love I have for this, it is given entirely by Bhagavan. But once he has given us at least a little love for this, we have a responsibility. If you've been given something very precious, supposing you're given a puppy dog or a baby or something very precious, or a small plant, something precious, and it's entrusted in your care, what do you have to do? You have to take good care of it. You have to nurture it, allow it to grow. So this love that Bhagavan has given us, well, even though it may seem to us to be a very small amount of love, that is the seed of love Bhagavan has sown in our heart. It is our responsibility to nurture this seed. So how do we nurture this seed? By the most important thing is trying to put this into practice. The more we practice this, the more our love for it will increase. But because we still have strong inclination to go outwards, our practice, the best support for our practice is by Sravana and Manana. That is reading Bhagavan's teachings and thinking deeply about them. The more we think about Bhagavan's teachings, the more we're encouraged to put them into practice. The more we put them into practice, the more we understand them, the more clearly we understand the depth of meaning and implication in them. And the more we understand them, the more love we have for them. The more love we have for them, the more we want to put them into practice. So the Sravana, Manana, Niti, Dhyasana are to go on hand in hand. The more we study Bhagavan's teachings, the more we will have inclination to put them into practice. The more we put them into practice, the more deeply we will understand them. The more deeply we understand them, the more love we will have to put them into practice. So the only that is the key, what is most essential is the practice. Merely doing Sravana Manana, if we try to just limit ourselves to Sravana Manana without doing any nididhyasana, without doing the practice, we will only have a very superficial understanding. We cannot get a deep understanding without putting it into practice. And the whole purpose of Bhagavan's teachings, well, without practice, Bhagavan's teaching, I wouldn't say they're pointless. I mean, even if the mere understanding of Bhagavan's teachings itself relieves a great burden from our mind. We become far more carefree if we understand his teaching. But we are getting only a very superficial benefit if we limit ourselves merely to studying and thinking about his teachings. Putting them into practice is what is most important. And the whole purpose of Bhagavan's teaching is to put them into practice. That is why Bhagavan has taught us what he's taught us, is for us to put them into practice. So the practice is most important. And the more we practice, the deeper our Sravana Manana will also become. And the deeper our appreciation of his teachings, the deeper our appreciation, not only of the meaning of his words, but also the implication of his words. that understanding grows as our practice deepens. So the only way to cultivate love for this is put it into practice. And to support you in putting it into practice, think often about his teaching. Think deeply about his teaching, what he taught us, why he taught us this, what is the purpose of all this. Whatever he taught us, it all has practical implication. What is the practical implication? And if we understand the practical implication, that will encourage us to put it into practice, to turn our attention within. Love is another type of vasana. There's love that we have to follow Bhagavan's teaching. This is the Vasana. The more we dwell on this, the more we try to put it into practice, the more we're strengthening that vasana and weakening all the other vasanas. So if you neglect Bhagavan's teachings and go about your day-to-day life, oh yes, Bhagavan taught something very nice, but it's not for me because I've got so many other cares and responsibilities in life. I don't have time for thinking about Bhagavan's teachings or practicing them. Let me get on with my life. If you neglect them in that way, that love that you have, the seed of love that Bhagavan's put in your heart, you are not watering it. So it's shriveling up and drying. We have a responsibility. Once Bhagavan has sown the seed of love in our heart, we have the responsibility now to water this seed, to nurture it, to give it all the nourishment and care that it needs. We can do that by the primary means is practice. The support for our practice is the Sravana Manana, the studying his teachings and thinking deeply about them. Because that encourages us and motivates us to put them into practice. So I hope that answers both parts of that question adequately.
Yeah, there are two more parts, and I'm not very certain exactly how it means, but perhaps we can decipher it. Is it correct to say that self-attentiveness means not taking for granted the fact that we exist, in the sense that in the practice we are trying to be always attentively aware of existing? Okay.
Yes, in a sense, yes, yeah. That is, we generally, because of we are always aware of our existence. We're always aware I am. But generally, we are, because of our interest in other things, we generally overlook our own existence. That is, we all know we exist. So, do you exist? Yes, I am. Of course I am. We've got no doubt about it. But it's such an ordinary thing, being aware of our existence. After all, the one thing that we're aware of at all times is our own existence. So our mind takes interest in knowing other things. Because we think that by knowing other things, we'll gain something from those other things. There's nothing to be gained from all those other things. What is actually real, what is the source of all happiness, is only ourself, only this fundamental awareness of our own existence. So instead of being negligently self-aware, instead of being negligently aware I am, we need to be attentively aware I am. We need to hold on to that awareness I am, dwell on that, keep our mind fixed on that. The more that is what is meant by being self-attentive, keeping the mind, as Bhagavan says, in the previous paragraph we talked about last time, 16th paragraph, keeping the mind always fixed on oneself. That alone is what is called Atma-vichara. Our self means our own existence, that fundamental awareness I am. That is what we actually are.
Now, this is the last part of the question. How is it possible that we have come to this reality, having invested so much in this dream world that we as ego have created, only to come back the way we came?
Dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction is the driving force behind all our efforts. Because what we actually are is infinite happiness. infinite satisfaction is our real nature. When we limit ourselves by rising as ego and thereby taking ourselves to be a form of a body, we have imposed limitations on ourselves. So we cannot be satisfied so long as we experience ourselves as anything other than the one infinite whole. So dissatisfaction is what drives us to do everything. Dissatisfaction is what drives the sinner to sin. Dissatisfaction is what drives the saint to be saintly. Dissatisfaction is the driving thing. So long as we believe that we can get happiness from this world, we'll be getting happiness. We start off getting happiness in all sorts of unrighteous ways. We're concerned only about ourselves. So we're not bothered about dharma and adharma, about papa and punya, sin and virtue. We're not worried about that. I want to enjoy this. I want that. I want this. So we grab everything for ourselves. That is at the starting stage of our spiritual journey. Slowly, we get lots of blows as a result of our trying to grab everything for ourselves, and we slowly understand. If we want to enjoy things, we need to enjoy it in a righteous way. We shouldn't be greedy. We shouldn't be selfish. We should abide by dharma. So we can enjoy artha, the wealth, the possessions, and we can enjoy karma, the sensual enjoyments, the pleasures of life. We can enjoy them, but within the bounds of dharma, within the bounds of righteousness. So we start becoming more righteous. And slowly, we are, even though we live a very righteous life, and though we enjoy a certain degree of wealth and a certain degree of pleasure, we're still dissatisfied. We try to enjoy more pleasures, still we're dissatisfied. However much pleasure we have, however much wealth we have, we are still dissatisfied. So slowly, we become dissatisfied even with following this path of dharma. There has to be something beyond living righteously and enjoying the fruits of righteous living. There has to be something beyond that. So we start looking, because of our dissatisfaction with this, with all the pleasures that this world can offer us, we are drawn to this spiritual path. So the same dissatisfaction, but is making the sinner sin, it has been driving us throughout our spiritual growth. From the time when we were the worst of sinners to the times when we slowly became more virtuous and became good law-abiding citizens or whatever. But still we are dissatisfied. However perfect, however righteous we are, however much pleasures we experience as a result of our righteous behavior, we're still dissatisfied. Even if we go to heaven and enjoy heavenly pleasures as a result of our good actions, we're still dissatisfied. So dissatisfaction will drive us on until we merge back in the source we came. So, as Bhagavan said, when we realize nothing in this world is going to satisfy us, then that is when we have to go back the way we came. So that is why we have now been drawn to Bhagavan's path, because of our dissatisfaction with this world. If we were still satisfied with the world, if we were still thinking, oh, I'm going to get happiness if I have more money, if I have more name and fame, if I live a more righteous life, then I'm going to be happy. We always think happiness is just around the corner, but it's always eluding us. We think if I have this, I'll be happy. When we get this, oh, not quite so happy. I need something else. So dissatisfaction is the very nature of ego is dissatisfaction. Another word for dissatisfaction is dukkha. Dukkha means dissatisfaction. It's the very nature of ego. So if we want to give up dukkha and experience only sukha, dukkha nivritti sukha prapti, that's the aim of spiritual life, removing the dukkha and attaining the sukha. So we want to give up dissatisfaction and attain satisfaction. How do we do so? That satisfaction, that happiness is our own real nature. In order to attain that happiness, as Bhagavan says in the first paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, Manamatra Nidrayal Dinamanubhavikam Tansubhavamana Achukate Adeya, to attain that happiness, which is one's own real nature, which one experiences daily in sleep, which is devoid of the mind. Why does Bhagavan say that? Because in sleep, nothing else is present, but we enjoy happiness. We are satisfied in sleep. Nobody is dissatisfied in sleep. Why? Because we experience nothing other than ourselves. So happiness is our real nature. So to attain that happiness, which is our real nature, tanne tan aridal vendam, knowing oneself is necessary. Adaku, for that, nana ennam jnana vicharame mukhya sadhanam. The investigation, who am I, is the principal means. For that, for attaining that happiness, for knowing oneself, this is the principal means. I hope that adequately answered that question.
I think it does. There are just two queries which are about your translations and so on, and people might be interested. So one is that, are you going to publish a book or an ebook in the future containing all your translations of Bhagavan's writings? And the second one is, do you think you might get a chance to record a new series of talks on the first 7 verses or so of Uladu Anarpadu? The posted ones have very challenging sound quality. Thank you so much for all you do.
Yes. The answer is yes to both, in the sense that I would like to do so. Whether it is Bhagavan's will or not, I don't know. One thing I'm trying to do now, because I've got translations of many of Bhagavan's works, but I haven't posted online. So I want to post those online. Some years ago, I began to write a detailed explanation about Atma-vichara. That is, in these meetings with the Ramana Maharshi Foundation, I gave a series of talks on Atma-vichara. So from that time, I began to write this detailed explanation. But because of the pressure of other work, I wasn't able to complete that. At present, I'm trying to find time to complete that, and I will then post that. Then I will post other translations, Ekatma Panchakam, Arunacha Navamani Malai, Patikam, Ashtakam, Pancharatnam. All these, I've got more or less finalized translations. I just need to post on my blog. And then other works like, there's some verses of Uludunaptu Anabandam that I haven't got fully revised translations of, so I want to complete that. I want to do Apalapatu, but most important of all, Arunachaksharam. My hope is, today I talked about the 17th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār. So next month, 18th and 19th paragraph, December, the 20th paragraph. So in December, this will be over. The last satsang in December is a festive satsang, so I won't be talking about this then. From January, I want to talk about the 4 verses of Apalapatu, which is also a very nice work Bhagavan has written, what he wrote for his mother. There's a lot of deep meaning in that. So I will talk about that possibly from January, February, and then maybe from March, I will begin to talk about Aksharam, which is the beating heart of Bhagavan's works. That is, Bhagavan poured his whole heart and soul into Aksharam. It is such an important work, such a deep work, such a very practical text. I have kept it for the last because it is the most precious and the one I feel most diffident about my ability to do justice to it. I'm sure I can't do justice to it, but at least I want to do my best. So, yes, I want to talk about all these works. And Uludunaptu, yes, I'm aware the early ones were not so well recorded, so I would like to do that also. And Uludunaptu Anabandam I'd like to do. And also there are some 27 stray verses of Upadesha that Bhagavan wrote, Upadesha Sadhvam, collecting them together under the title Upadesha Tanipakal. That I would also like to do. Once those are completed, well, I want to make them available online on my blog. And then if it is Bhagavan's will, maybe they'll later become books. But because of so many demands on my time, my progress in doing these sort of things is slow, but hopefully with time, all these things will come out, and hopefully one day it will be available both as an ebook and as a hard copy book. But that's all in Bhagavan's hands. It's entirely up to him. If he wants these things to appear in book form, they will certainly appear in book form. So let's leave it to him. But I have the good intention is there. Whether it will ever, as Bhagavan, as Krishna says in Gita, you have right to the action, not to the fruit thereof. So I've got good intention. If it's Bhagavan's will, it will happen. We'll see. Let's leave it to him. The fruit is entirely in his hands. We have good intention, or we hope our intentions are good, not too bad anyway. But we leave the result to him.
The next question is, when hunting for the I, will it help if we initially behold Bhagwan's image? Does Bhagwan endorse this as Guru, God, and Self are all the same?
Firstly, we are not hunting for the I. If you can hunt for something that you've lost or something that you don't know, what is the one thing that we always know? It is I. It is I am. The one thing that we are never in doubt about is I. So there's nothing, as Bhagavan said, Atma-vichara is not is not something new to be attained. Atma-vichara is our very nature. We ourselves for that jnana. That jnana means that pure awareness, I am, that is our very nature. Even when we rise as ego, we are aware I am. The problem is when we rise as ego, instead of being aware of ourselves as we actually are, we're aware of ourselves as something else. Instead of being aware of ourselves as just I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this or I am that. I am Michael, I am this body, I am this mind, whatever it is. So there's no new knowledge to be attained. All we have to do is to remove the wrong knowledge, I am this or I am that, and what remains is what is always there, namely I am. So we are not hunting for the I. The I is what is always shining clearly. What we are, though we always know that we are, we now do not know what we are because we mistake ourselves to be something else. So we are investigating ourselves to know what we are. It's not to find some I but has been lost, and that there's nothing but by holding on to what we actually are, which is that fundamental awareness I am, by holding on to what is, that alone is real. By holding on to what is real, the unreal drops off. So the more we hold on to ourselves, the more we hold on to self-attentiveness, the more other things drop off. If we think that we are hunting for the I, then the I becomes an object, something that we are looking for. That is where a lot of confusion comes, because people say, I'm not able to find the I. I can't understand what Bhagavan is saying because I can't find the I. They're looking for something other than themselves, because the I that says, I can't find the I, it's itself the I, but we are looking for it. It's not we are looking for it, we should be looking at it. So it's not a matter of looking for ourselves, it's a matter of looking at ourselves, it's a matter of attending to ourselves. What we actually are will reveal itself to us if we hold on to, if we look at it carefully enough, it will reveal itself. So we are not looking for ourselves, we're looking at ourselves. So this term hunting the I is a very, Bhagavan never used such a term to the best of my knowledge. And it seems to me to be a very misleading and confusing term. Regarding about the rest of the question, is it helpful to have an image of Bhagavan? What is the true image of Bhagavan? That is, of course, we all have love for Bhagavan's name and form. We love Bhagavan as the person that he seems to us to be. that old man with a walking stick who lived 54 years in Tiruvannamalai, who gave us all these precious teachings, and who was so kind and loving, equally loving to all, to the good and to the bad, to the rich and to the poor, to the animals and to humans, all without any distinction. He had equal love for all, because in his view, he alone exists. So nothing is other than himself. So he loves us all as himself, because he sees us as himself. So we naturally have so much love for Bhagavan. But Bhagavan himself said, I am not this form. Who is Arunachala Ramana? He himself said, Ariyati Tarajivara Dahavari Jaguhayil Arivairami Paramatman Arunachala Ramanan. Arunachala Ramana is the Paramatma, the Supreme Self, the Supreme Spirit, but blissfully exists as Arivu, as awareness, in the cave of the heart lotus of all the different jivas, beginning with Hari. So Bhagavan is that which is shining in the heart of each one of us as I. So that is the image, that is the true image of Bhagavan. That is the image we should keep before our mind's eye when we're investigating ourselves. When we're attending to his outward image, we're not attending to ourselves, our attention is going outwards. But I'm not saying it's useless to attend to his outward image, because when we look in Bhagavan's eyes, where are Bhagavan's eyes looking? They're looking back at us. Through his eyes, he's telling us, see yourself. I am that which is shining in you as I. So he is telling us to turn back within. So if the true image of Bhagavan is I am. That which is shining in our heart as I am, that is Bhagavan. So in the second half of that verse Arunachala Ramanan, he says, Parival ulam uruha. What is the key to success in this path is to have heart melting with love. So he says, heart melting with love, when one enters the heart, where that supreme absolute, where that supreme reality, Arunachala Ramana, resides as awareness, the eye of awareness will be open, and it Arivam Viri Tirava Nijam Ariva. You will know the truth. You will know what is real. You'll know your own real nature. Why? Adu Veliyam, it will reveal itself. So what do we have to do? As I said, we are not looking for I. We should be looking at I. We should be attending to I. The more keenly we look at ourselves, the more our real nature, the more Bhagavan, who is our own real nature, will reveal himself. And one more thing I'll mention here, because you asked about meditating on the form of Bhagavan. Yes, it is good to meditate on the form of Bhagavan, but the purpose of why Bhagavan appeared in human name and form was to tell us to turn within. There was a devotee of Bhagavan who had great love for Bhagavan. Her name was Janaki Mata. She came from Tanjore. She often used to visit Bhagavan, and whenever she came, whenever she could, she would come and visit Bhagavan. And one day during one of her visits, she happened to see Bhagavan was returning from the Gosala. Gosala means the cowshed, where Lakshmi and the other cows live. Bhagavan often used to go there to see Lakshmi and the other cows and see that they're all being taken well care of, and to talk to them, because he has same love for them as he has for us. He has equal love for all. So Bhagavan was particularly fond of Lakshmi and the other cows. So he often used to go there. So one day, Janaki Mata saw Bhagavan returning from the cowshed, and there were only two other people, two attendants or someone were accompanying him. No one else was present. So she was very excited. This is a very good opportunity. So she approached Bhagavan. She prostrated before him, put her head on his feet, and held his ankles and held his feet in her hands. Bhagavan looked down at her with a loving smile and said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm holding my guru's feet." Then Bhagavan said, "This body is perishable. These feet are perishable. If you take this body, if you take these feet to be the body and feet of your guru. If you take these to be your guru, you're going to be disappointed, because these are going to go one day. They're going to, all material things perish. So this body is perishable. It's going to die one day. Don't take me to be this, because you'll be disappointed. One day I'm going to go and you'll be disappointed. He didn't say that. He didn't. I'm elaborating on what he said. He simply said, this body is perishable. These feet are perishable. These are not the feet of your guru. The feet of your guru are what is shining in your heart as eye. Hold on to those feet. Those feet alone will save you. So, though we have love to look at the form of Bhagavan, to look at the form of Arunachala, naturally we have love for, we can't help but love Bhagavan, because of he's given us such a great treasure in the form of his teachings. He's transformed our whole life by coming into our life. So we have love for him. But we should, why did he appear in this name and form? Is he this perishable body that lived for 54 years? Is Bhagavan dead? Many people nowadays ask, is a living guru necessary? As if Bhagavan is a dead guru. They misunderstood Bhagavan. Bhagavan came to reveal, but the real guru is that which is shining in our heart as eye. The real guru upasana, the real worship of guru is to attend only to I. So let us attend to I with heart melting with love, and he will reveal himself to us, as he assured us in that verse. So we should always remember what he actually is that which is shining in our heart as eye. That's the very purpose of his appearing outwardly in name and form, was to turn our attention back within. So when we, by all means, meditate on his form, and look at his eyes and see where his eyes are pointing. They're pointing back at you. Then turn your attention back to you, because he is that which is shining in your heart as eye. We should have so much conviction. Otherwise, as Bhagavan says in the 8th verse of Upadeshunya, so long as we're meditating on Bhagavan as a name and form, we're taking him to be someone other than ourselves. That is Anya Bhava. Bhagavan says, rather than Anya Bhava, be Ananya Bhava, recognizing that he is I. That is the best among all. So the whole purpose of Bhagavan's appearing outwardly in that name and form is to turn our attention back within. So let us follow his path, rather than just by all means meditate on his form, but let his form turn your mind back within, because his true form is that which is shining in our heart as eye.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Thank Bhagavan. I just repeated what Bhagavan said. It was Bhagavan who sang Ariyati Tarajiva Tahabari Jugu Hail Arivairami Paramatu Manarunachala Ramanam Parivalula Muluhanala Paranandi Jugu Hayandu Arivam Tira Nijamai Aduveliam. Bhagavan sang that. I'm just repeating what Bhagavan has said.
The next question is, sometimes I have found ants in my kitchen cabinet and I'll wipe them out with a towel, and then I feel bad because I have killed them. But how else would I deal with this?
Bhagavan has said, but we have no right. There's a verse in Guru Vachakakavai in which Bhagavan has said, we have no right to take the life of any living creature, because when we do not have the power to restore the life, we do not have the power, we do not have the right to take it. So as far as possible, we should avoid killing any creature, even ants and so on. If you have ants in your kitchen cupboard, you can gently brush them out, put them on a towel, and go and shake the towel outside. Take them outside. Try to avoid killing even ants or mosquitoes or anything. They have as much right to be here as we have. So let us live and let live. Let us not take the life of any other living being. As much as how much supposing our life is in danger. So supposing someone comes and threatens us with a gun or a knife or something, or we are nearly hit by a car while crossing the road, how much we fear to lose our life. We have so much attachment to but it's not our life, but we have an attachment to this body. So just like we have so much desire to live in this body, every jiva has desire to live in its body. So we have no right to take the life of any living creature. So in the spiritual path, one of the fundamental and the most important moral principle, but all spiritual aspirants should follow, is ahimsa. We should avoid causing harm to any other living creature. We should avoid anything that even indirectly gives harm to other living creatures. So we should try our best not to be of harm to anyone, least of all taking the life of any living creature.
So this is a question from somebody who's quite new to the satsangs. And the question is, I was shown that all that I believed I experienced, which is severe dysfunction within the family, did not affect or infect anyone, since no one is there. It wasn't until a Kimberly, the name of a person, believed she existed separate from ultimate truth that a perceived trauma occurred. Is this correct? I'm just wondering if the person who asked the question would like to ask it as well, if there's anything to be added.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, up until 3 years ago, I really believed I was just a human being that died and lived, and hopefully with no regrets. And I had an experience that took me into everything that I thought that I had happened to me. And I was no longer actually there. And it showed me and said to me that all that believed to have experienced what it did was not affected or infected by any of it. That it actually was all of it. That it was just an experience experiencing itself. And it wasn't until I, Kimberly, believed that she was separate from the experiences that were being experienced, that the perceived trauma, because there was a lot. I mean, 32 drug programs by the time I was 20, those kind of things started to happen when in effect, there wasn't anybody there being affected. And because this is so far from what I believed actually happened, it's been a little difficult, obviously, for the mind and that persona to believe that that's true.
There cannot be any experience without an experiencer. That is, whatever experiences occur, to whom do they occur? They occur to me. So there is always an I as the experiencer of any experience. Many people, there is a prevalent misunderstanding of Bhagavan's teaching. Bhagavan taught us that ego doesn't exist. That is the ultimate truth. So many people, they latch onto that and say there's no ego, there's no I. We need to understand that teaching in the context of Bhagavan's teachings as a whole. Bhagavan also said, when ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. When ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. So all other things seem to exist only in the view of ego. That is the one who is aware of itself as I am Kimberly. That is ego. And it's only when you are aware of yourself as I am Kimberly, but you're aware of other things. I am Kimberly, it could be any person. It's not, the name Kimberly is not important, the person is not important. But we are only when we are aware of ourselves as a person, as a body consisting of 5 sheaths, body, life, mind, intellect, and will. When we experience ourselves as a person, we experience other things. When we do not experience ourselves as a person, we do not experience anything else. We can see this from our own experience. In waking and dream, we're aware of ourselves as a person. In sleep, we are not aware of ourselves as a person. And consequently, we're not aware of anything other than ourselves. We're aware of ourselves alone when we're asleep. In waking a dream, we're aware of ourselves as a person. I am Kimberly, or I'm Michael, or I'm whoever. And consequently, we're aware of other things. So, but so long as anything is experienced, there is an experiencer. The experiencer is ego. Ego, when Bhagavan says ego doesn't exist, that is the ultimate truth. That is, we seem to be ego so long as we're attending to other things. If we turn our attention back to attend to ourselves, we won't find any such thing as ego. We will thereby merge back into the source from which we rose, and we will remain at the pure awareness that we actually are. That is the source from which we rose. So when we know ourselves as we actually are, we will know that we never rose as ego. There never was any ego, and consequently, there never was any experience of anything other than ourselves. But so long as we have any experiences of any kind whatsoever, so long as we're aware of anything other than I am, that which is aware of those other things is only ego. So let us not imagine. Let's not say, but there were experiences experiencing themselves. Experiences cannot experience themselves. There's always an experiencer. That is all experience or knowledge of anything other than ourselves consists of there are three essential factors. There's what is known, there's the means of knowing it, and there's what knows it, the knower. The knower is ego. Without a means of knowing, there cannot be any knowledge. And without a knower, there cannot be any means of knowing. So everything that is experienced and the means by which we experience it all depend only on ourself as ego, the knower, the experiencer. So ego is the root problem. When we investigate, so long as we're looking away from ego at other things, we seem to be ego. When we turn our attention back to investigate ourselves, who am I? This ego begins to subside and dissolves back into its source. So that's the first thing to clarify. So throughout, from the moment we become aware of anything other than ourselves, we're aware of ourselves as a separate being. And as you say, all trauma comes because of this separation. The separation occurs because we rise as ego. When we rise as ego, we always limit ourselves as a body. So long as I limit myself as this body, I am this, I am not that. So there's a separation. I am different, all these other things are different. So all differences, all multiplicity arises, all separation arises because we have limited ourselves as a separate body, as a separate person. And that which is aware of itself as I am this person, that is ego. That is the I, that is the problem. That I, it is not real as ego, but there is an element of reality in that ego, because what is ego? Ego is the adjunct conflated awareness. I am this person, I am Kimberly, or I am Michael, I am whoever. That is ego. That which is aware of itself as I am Kimberly, or I am Michael, or whoever, that is ego. So that ego consists of two elements. There's a fundamental element, which is I am. That's our own awareness of our own existence. That is what is real. There's also the adjunct, what is added to I am. That is the person that we seem to be, Kimberly or Michael or whoever. So we conflate these two. Now we experience ourselves as I am Kimberly. That I is something distinct from Kimberly. Kimberly is an adjunct. So if you investigate yourself, that's if you investigate that fundamental awareness of your own existence, I am, Kimberly will drop off, because Kimberly seems to exist only when you hold on to her. When you when you look outwards, you seem to be Kimberly. When you look within, Kimberly and everything else will drop off. I am alone will remain. When I am alone remains, all separation dissolves because there's nothing other than I am. And that is the state where the trauma of being an ego comes to an end. Until then, we're all in a state of trauma. Rising as an ego and experiencing ourselves as separate is traumatic. That is why we are dissatisfied. That's why we're always feeling ourselves to be deficient. We're looking for things outside ourselves to make up for our deficiency. But nothing outside ourselves exists independent of ourselves. So nothing can make up for that deficiency. The only way to make up for the deficiency is dissolve this sense of separation, this ego that is aware of itself as I am just this, not that. Dissolve this ego back in its source by turning our attention back within and holding on to what alone is real, which is I am.
Next one is the desire to know my true self has only grown. It's become a deeper desire and need, though I still get distracted, which I know is normal for the ego, but my focus returns to the inquiry and abidance in the I. So that seems to be less a question than something which is very good.
Yeah, very good. That's what we're all aiming for.
So the next question is, the question is that often when doing inquiry, I find my attention drawn to my physical chest. I know that the I is not in my body and that my body is in myself. But perhaps there's a belief that keeps directing my attention to the chest, or perhaps a vasana. Is the basic thing to keep asking, who is it that experiences the I in my chest? Is that the approach?
Asking the question can be useful to the extent that it turns our attention back to ourselves. But we need to understand, though Bhagavan gave us many pointers to help us to understand this practice, and some of the pointers he gave were phrased in the form of questions. To whom does this appear? To whom does this sensation in the chest appear? To whom does this body appear? To whom does this world appear? To whom do all these thoughts appear? So he expressed that in the form of a question. Likewise, he expressed other questions. Who am I? What is the source from which I rise as ego? So various questions, Bhagavan, he expressed the pointers in the form of questions, but he was not telling us to question ourselves. Merely questioning ourselves is a mental activity. Asking the question may be helpful if it reminds us to turn our attention back to ourselves. But what Bhagavan means when he says invest, he doesn't say ask to whom does this appear. He says investigate to whom does this appear. Investigating to whom does this appear means turning our attention away from what is ever appears back towards ourselves, the one to whom it appears. And then he says, if you investigate who am I, the thought that had risen the mind will return to its birthplace, and the thought that had risen will subside. What he means by investigating who am I is having turned our attention back to ourselves. If we hold on to ourselves, if we hold on to that self-attentiveness, the mind will thereby subside back into its source, its birthplace, as he calls it. And the thought that had risen, because we are attending only to ourselves, thoughts can rise only if we attend to them. So if we turn our attention back to ourselves, the thought that have risen will also subside. So the aim is not to question who am I, or not to question to whom. The aim is to turn our attention away from other things, back towards ourselves, the one to whom everything appears, and then to hold on to ourselves and just to be as we actually are. I hope that adequately answers that question. And regarding the sensation in the chest, yes, there is as far as that is Bhagavan said, so long as we are aware of ourselves as this body, the point in the body where that awareness I is centered is in the chest, 2 digits to the right from the center of the chest. And to illustrate that, Bhagavan pointed out that if you say, if someone asks you, who can do the sum correctly. You don't point at your head and say, I can do the sum correctly. And if someone asks, who can run fastest? You don't point at your feet and say, I can run fastest. We always say, I can do it. We pointed at, when we refer to ourselves, we point at this point because that is the center relative to this body. But that is just a fact that is true relative to the body. It's not, there's no deep spiritual significance in this. It's just a simple phenomenon. It's something that we can observe. And we can observe that as the center from which all emotions and other things. We talk about someone being brokenhearted. We talk about we refer to the heart as the seat of our emotions because we feel our emotions in our chest. Another thing we can see very clearly, for example, if we suddenly get a shock, for example, supposing you're walking down the street and suddenly a car behind you honks its horn, or suddenly there's a loud explosion or something. When we suddenly feel a shock, if you observe at that time, you'll feel a sensation 2 digits to the right from the center of the chest. So there is a connection with that point, but it is of no spiritual significance. Sometimes when we turn our attention away from other things back towards ourselves, we will sometimes feel a sensation there, but we should ignore it because it's of no significance. To whom did that sensation appear? To me. So we turn our attention back to ourselves. So that we can experience that place in various ways. It's of no significance. So we shouldn't allow our mind to dwell on that. What we should dwell on is only ourselves, only I. We're not, the body and every point in the body is an object. They're all objects. We are not to attend to any object. We are trying to attend to the subject. To whom do all these things appear? We're trying to attend to the perceiver, to the witness, to the seer, to the one who's aware of all these things.
Thanks, Michael.
Right.
The next one is seems to be more of a comment, but this says, these satsangs with Michael are very precious, giving us an ever-deepening understanding of Bhagavan's teaching. Whatever Michael's talks about is of great help and inspiration. I have one wish, and maybe some share this with me, that Bhagavan's path is all about practice, and all theory given by him points to our practice in everyday life. And also, as we, or at least I, have a tendency to make things more complicated than they are, many pitfalls in trying to practice Atma-vichara, I guess, remain. My wish is that one or more satsangs could be devoted to explaining the practice of Atma-vichara, which I find Michael to be the most competent person to do. For example, I found the text, "The I thought is the root of all thoughts," that was posted on the Facebook page of RMF on 13th October to be very helpful, as it gives us a good explanation about the ego as the root thought. It also works as a very good instruction about how to practice. In this way, Michael can deepen understanding in so many ways.
Okay. Regarding the practice, the actual practice that Bhagavan taught us is extremely simple. It is just being self-attentive or being attentively self-aware, holding on to I am, whatever. We can express it in various ways, but the actual practice is extremely simple. As you say, all of Bhagavan's teachings are pointing towards this practice. Whatever Bhagavan taught us, I'm talking now about Bhagavan's core teachings, not if we read books like talks or Maharshi's Gospel or things, people ask questions about all sorts of things. So Bhagavan was, as far as possible, he's pointing back to, he's pointing people's attention back towards themselves, but sometimes he has to come down to their level. But the core teachings of Bhagavan, the essential teachings of Bhagavan, all have deep practical implications. So we need to understand the practical implications. If you ask me to say what is the practice, I can say it in just a few words, but people, however much Bhagavan has given us so many pointers to this practice, but there are some people who still don't grasp what it is. So in order to grasp it, the more we understand Bhagavan's teachings, for example, like the passage you refer to, where Bhagavan says, in fact, Bhagavan said this on many occasions, that the root of all thoughts is the first thought I, because all other thoughts exist only in the view of I. If we read such passages and think about them and understand why Bhagavan says that I thought is the root of all thoughts, the more we understand his teachings correctly, the clearer the practice will become to us. So merely understanding is necessary, but it's not sufficient. We need to understand his teachings correctly in order to put them into practice correctly. But our aim is not merely to understand it. The understanding is a means, it's not the end. So when I'm talking about Bhagavan's teachings, I'm talking about, as far as possible, I try to focus on Bhagavan's original writings, because in my experience, all the questions that we ask about anything, an answer is implied there in his teaching. So I try to connect whatever questions people ask, I try to connect back to what Bhagavan has said in his own writings. The more we understand what he has written in his own original writings, in other words, the more we understand his core teachings, the clearer the practice will become to us. And the clearer, yes, there are pitfalls on the path, but how to avoid those pitfalls will also become clear when we understand his teaching. We're not to dwell on the, some people say, can you talk about pitfalls? Well, allowing our attention to move away from ourselves is a pitfall. Once we've allowed our attention to move away from ourselves, the pitfalls are countless. So the point is, we're not to allow our attention to move away from ourselves. So we need to understand the core principles of Bhagavan's teachings. If we understand the core principles, then what is the practice, how to put this into practice becomes clear to us. As you will have seen, in every talk I give, I'm repeatedly emphasizing the need for practice. But if you ask me to say what is the practice, I can say it in just a few words. But practice is very simple. We need to impress upon ourselves why the practice is necessary. We need to have a clear understanding of what the practice is and what is happening. What is the efficacy of being self-attentive? The more we attend to ourselves, the more we are thereby not allowing ourselves to be swayed by our Vishaya Vasanas. So we're strengthening the Satvasana, we're weakening the Vishaya Vasanas. So we need to understand these. We need to understand what we are to do, why we are to do it, and what is the effect of our doing it. Then once we've understood these basic principles of Bhagavan's teachings, there won't be any need to ask Michael any questions, because we'll be able to find the answers ourselves within Bhagavan's teachings. How am I able to answer all these questions? Because I've got such I've been thinking about these things and trying to put them into practice for the last 40 plus years, more than 40 years now. So 45 years now. So because my mind is so soaked in Bhagavan's teachings, and when I talk about Bhagavan's teaching, I'm talking about his core teachings, what his original works, because that's where we find the core principles of his teaching. Whatever questions people ask me, I seem to be able to answer them effortlessly, because I find, for me, it's very clear the answers have already been given by Bhagavan. So I'm just pointing out what Bhagavan has said. So this is why I focus on Bhagavan's own writing, because if we understand this, then the practice will become clear. How to deal with the obstacles to the practice will become clear. Everything falls in place. So when some people talk about, oh, I'm not interested in the theory, I'm just interested in the practice. They have not understood Bhagavan correctly, because in Bhagavan, there is no we cannot bifurcate Bhagavan's teachings of theory and practice. But theory, well, it's not theory. I mean, what Bhagavan, the principles, the underlying principles that Bhagavan has taught us all have practical implications. So understanding the principles is the way to understand the practice. And putting those principles into practice is the way to understand them more deeply. And the more deeply we understand them, more deeply we can put them into practice. So I think I'm saying, as far as I'm aware, I'm saying all that can be said about the practice. The main thing is we need to understand what the practice is, and we need to understand why we need to put it into practice, and how this practice is efficacious, how it deals with all problems. All problems are solved by this practice of self-investigation. But the key to this practice is the love. We must have love to do it. We must persevere. Our love may be inadequate, but we can cultivate that love by persevering in this practice. I hope that adequately answers that question. Shalini, I think you're...
Yeah. The last one, this is the last question. The I thought is the root of all... Oh, no, sorry. I think this is to everybody. I think that's the last question, Michael. I think we've finished on time today.
Okay.
So
the I thought, ego, is the starting point and it's the ending point. We start with the rising of ego. Finally, this ego has to subside. The rising of ego is bondage. The subsidence of ego is liberation. Subsidence means the permanent dissolution of ego. Manonasa, that is liberation.
Can I say something, Michael?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah. I put the question about, or the suggestion or wish about satsangs, about Atma-vichara. The reason is that I found this very short text of you explained so very much, and also made my own practice, something happened. Really, when I had read this text and analyzed it, and I think you explained in which way the ego is the root thought and the relation to all other thoughts as inert. So that made a lot for me, and that made this wish that maybe we could have some more time in the satsangs for this. But then I agree completely with all that you say, that all Bhagavan's teachings point to this, but sometimes we need somebody to clear these things for us, which you are doing.
Yeah.
So I agree completely. I'm satisfied.
Whenever you feel any need for further clarification on the practice, I mean, that is what Bhagavan teachings are all about. They're all about practice. So the more the questions that are asked are focusing on the practice, the more useful it will be. Yeah. But even when people ask me questions that are not specifically focused on the practice, as far as possible, I try to bring it back to the practice, because the practice is what it's all about.
Yeah.
What is so special about Bhagavan's teachings is, but that is the in the 16th paragraph and 17th paragraph, Bhagavan is indirectly criticizing a lot of the Advaita sastras, but talk about unnecessary things, about all the non-self, all about these tatwas and so on, and so much analysis of what is not real. Advaita, if we understand the core principles of Advaita, what is the core of Advaita? The core of Advaita is there is one only without a second, ekameva advaitiyam. And what is that one? You are that. If we understand this is the core of Advaita, so if I am that, then who am I? That is we need to understand the practical implication. Yeah. Till we come to Advaita, we've been looking for things outside ourselves. We've been looking for happiness outside ourselves. We've been looking for knowledge outside ourselves, science outside ourselves, God outside ourselves. We're always looking for things outside ourselves. So the whole purpose of Advaita is to say, stop looking outside, look within. You are, whatever you're seeking, you yourself are that. Because we are the source from which all this appears. So nothing other than ourselves can give us anything, but we cannot find within ourselves. So we've been, till now, till we come to the path of Advaita, we've been looking in the wrong direction. But many people, even after coming to the path of Advaita, they don't understand the practical implication of Advaita, so they continue philosophizing, writing bigger and bigger and bigger books and commentaries and so on. Bhagavan came to simplify it all, to point out what is the practical implication of the heart of Advaita. So Bhagavan's teachings are the essence of Advaita in the clearest, simplest, and most practical way. So the whole purpose of Bhagavan's avatara, the whole purpose of his appearing in this form was to emphasize that Advaita is extremely practical. And the purpose of Advaita is practice. Otherwise, it's just another nice philosophy. There's so many nice philosophies. We can continue philosophizing. Philosophizing is not our aim. Philosophy must have a purpose. What is the purpose? To know what we actually are. That is the purpose of Advaita philosophy. So if we understand Advaita properly, it's impressing upon us the need for us to know ourselves. If we understand that, then we, as Bhagavan says in the 16th paragraph, there's no need to go on reading endlessly. We don't need all the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita. There's useful things in all these texts, but take the useful things. What are the useful things? Are those things that are pointing back at ourselves, pointing back at the need for us to know, who am I? That is the essence of it all. So Bhagavan's teachings are all about practice. The whole purpose of Bhagavan's avatara is to impress upon us what are the practical implications of the heart of Advaita teachings, not all the superfluous stuff, which is just analysis of the non-self, as Bhagavan said. That's all counting and analyzing the gunas of the qualities of the hairs on the barber's floor. Sweep it all away. Who am I? That is what we need to know.
Yes.
So this is what Bhagavan teaching is all about. So if you've got any questions about practice, yes. Any other question, they all had to be brought back to the practice.
Yeah. Thank you.
If we read books like talks or any books of dialogues with Bhagavan, the recordings may not be so perfect, but one thing we can see from them, how Bhagavan was constantly trying to turn people's attention back towards themselves. That's what we need to take from such books. Yeah. But if we want to get to understand his teaching more clearly and more correctly, we need to study his original works.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Ramanaya.